As he has before, the president expressed his thoughts on the subject bluntly.
We're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals.
Well, if anything, that's a mild description. Dogs are animals, and a lot of them sleep on the bed. You wouldn't want to be anywhere near MS-13. They traffic in drugs, weapons, and human beings, young girls. Unlike animals, they kill for fun, often with machetes. They terrorize the poor and the vulnerable. They've made El Salvador the most dangerous country in the world. There is literally no defending them, and yet the left is defending them. Here's how the New York Times described what the president said, quote, Trump lashed out at undocumented immigrants during a White House meeting, calling those trying to breach the country's borders animals. Over at Jeff Bezos' vanity publication, the Washington Post, there was this, quote, Trump evokes an ugly history of dehumanization. So the president is a Nazi for criticizing a violent street gang. Newspapers haven't been this yellow since they started the Spanish-American War. For her part, over at the House, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi raced to the nearest microphone to defend the dignity of MS-13. Watch this.
We're all God's children. There's a spark of divinity in every person on earth. And so when the President of the United States says about undocumented immigrants, these aren't people, these are animals, you have to wonder, does he not believe in the spark of divinity, the dignity and worth of every person? Every day that you think you've seen it all, along comes another manifestation of why their policies are so inhumane.
Well, that's not just dishonest, though obviously it is. It's lunatic. Why would the left be defending the country's most violent street gang? Trump has made them irrational. That's part of it. But the left also senses a threat to its most basic worldview. MS-13 is a living reminder that the left's position on immigration is fundamentally a lie. The media tell you every day that every immigrant, legal or not, is a future brain surgeon or tech company founder. Therefore, immigration controls are unnecessary. If they admit that MS-13 is actually bad and must be stopped, they'd have to also admit that when some countries send their people here, they aren't sending their best. A lot of immigrants are great, for sure. Some of them are rapists, though. Some join MS-13. That's just true. They're not all the same because people aren't all the same. That's the point of our immigration law. They're not the same. We should sort the good from the bad. But that's too much for the left. It suggests that this might be a real country whose actual citizens have interests that are worth protecting. Yesterday on Twitter, the governor of California, Jerry Brown, went after the president's views on immigration, and he ended his tweet this way, quote, "We, the citizens of the fifth largest economy in the world, are not impressed." Citizens of the economy. That says it all. To the modern left, you're not an American with a culture and a history and a collective identity. You're a citizen of the economy, a cog in the machine of global capitalism. To Jerry Brown and Nancy Pelosi and their many donors, America's just another private equity scheme. Their pledge is different from yours. And to the economy for which it stands, one economy, indivisible, with open borders and low wages for all. That's the future they promise. Don't worry, it'll sound better in Spanish. Enrique Acevedo is an anchor for Univision. He joins us now. And Enrique, you seem like a reasonable person. How did you wind up with the group and the media defending MS-13? Did you ever think you'd be there?
I don't think any human being is an animal, Tucker, but I'm not here to defend criminals, nor should anyone else.
Yes,
if you're for law and order, I don't think degrading anyone to less than human serves that purpose. You would expect the President of the United States to speak to our highest ideals and not just our worst instincts.
So let's just to put this in some context, here are a couple recent headlines about MS-13. MS-13 gang stabbed man 100 times, decapitated him, and ripped out his heart, police say. MS-13 beat sex trafficked girl with a bat 28 times. MS-13 members in satanic shrine kidnapped, drugged, and raped a 14-year-old Houston girl. I could go on. When you hear those people described as animals, you get offended. Why? Why would people who do that need to be defended by you? What about what Trump said sort of got you going?
I think we cannot pretend to look at this in a larger context. We cannot pretend that this is not part of a larger trend that started way before Donald Trump became president, a trend of criminalizing and dehumanizing all immigrants, not just the bad hombres. The question was about gang members who are operating inside the U.S. President Trump answered by calling those coming across the border animals.
No, I mean, look, I'm not here to defend all of Trump's views, but in this very specific case, he was asked about MS-13. He's been talking about this for more than a year, and he said they're animals. Now, you may not like the term. Maybe it's imprecise or whatever, but I find it so interesting that you rush to the defense of MS-13. Is there no one else you can defend? There are not other worthy people being attacked? You need to defend a street gang that worships Satan and beheads people? Like, do you wake up in the morning and ask yourself, like, how did I get here? I'm a decent person. Why am I defending MS-13?
I'm not sure what you mean when you say that I defended MS-13. I actually
defending them.
I started this interview by saying I'm not here to defend any criminals, especially
and then you went on to defend them to say that they were dehumanized.
No, I'm just saying that no human being is an animal. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
so
but
dehumanizing someone doesn't serve the purpose of law and order. It serves the purpose of chaos and lawlessness.
Okay. We're all animals, okay, just as a biological question. Maybe that the term is imprecise. Maybe you don't like it. But you're rushing to the defense, and it's not just you. It's John Harwood at the New York Times. It's the entire media establishment, and the Democratic Party is unable to admit that there are immigrants who shouldn't be here. They're horrible. They kill people, especially the poor and the vulnerable, and MS-13 is the embodiment of that.
And I think we agree on that point. There are a lot of bad apples inside the immigrant community. That's why President Trump and Jeff Sessions should work with the Hispanic community to try to root those bad apples out of the
Why the Hispanic community? Wait, hold on, what do you mean the Hispanic community?
Federal funding from sanctuary cities so they won't report crimes and they'll be afraid of going to the police.
The Hispanic community doesn't have a monopoly on the concerns of all Americans of all colors and backgrounds, ethnicities, about crime. It has nothing to do with Hispanic or black or white. It's Americans don't want animals like this in the country. And again, I just ask you, why did it bother you when he said that? I just think it's weird. It's kind of a weird response.
It bothered me because, I think you have to put things in context, and I'll do that for you.
Okay.
The context here has to do with a larger trend, with President Trump calling Mexican immigrants rapists and then calling some white nationalists very fine people. The context here has to do with President Trump pardoning Arpaio and canceling DACA. The context here has to do with a constant conflating of immigration and criminality. When have you heard someone in the Trump administration say something positive about immigrants?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
they're not required by the Constitution, or they have benefited from.
Okay, first of all, they have whatever. They're not required by the Constitution to complement immigrants. Sorry. Second, you may not agree with all of his policies, but in this specific case, he's criticizing people who are evil and are killing, once again, the poor and the defenseless. And you've been driven so crazy by Trump that you can't even accept that as true. If I attack Charles Manson as an animal, does that bother you?
Of course not. And you know what? I agree with President Trump.
Why? Because he's not an immigrant or Hispanic?
Should be deported. But guess what? Last year, ICE arrests were up by 30%, and the larger percentage of that increase had to do with non-criminal immigrants. So if they want to get rid of the bad hombres instead of separating families, they should focus on that and not deport a larger number of people who have no criminal records.
Wait, why don't we look? People who are here legally should be deported. That's what the law says. If you don't like the law, change it in the Congress. If you're here illegally, you should leave now.
On dangerous criminals.
I
agree with that. They should focus on dangerous criminals.
I think we should
focus resources, time, and energy on those people, on the bad hombres.
I'm sick of being bullied by foreigners about who we can deport and who we can't. Our law says if you're here illegally, we get to deport you, period. I'm sure a lot of good people would be deported if we did that. I'd feel sad about it, but that's our law.
The law also says that you're entitled to request asylum, and we were also criticizing that last week when the caravan came to the border.
That's our law, and foreigners have no right to weigh in on our asylum laws because they're not voters or citizens. We get to decide. And but final question, why does it not bother you when I call Charles Manson an animal, but it does bother you when Trump calls MS-13 animals?
It bothers me when any criminal commits such horrific acts of criminality, and I see how people can be deeply affected by them. But I don't think that degrading someone to less than human serves the purpose of law and order. President Trump seems to understand very well what speaks to the Trump base. But he's not the president of the Fox News audience. He's also the president of the Univision audience. And he's not speaking to the anxieties and the concerns of Hispanics.
Really? So who do you you speak for all Hispanics?
No,
Are
of course not.
you the appointed leader of Hispanics now? How'd you get that job? Were you elected to it?
No, I'm not speaking for all Hispanics. I'm saying the president should speak to all Hispanics.
Very quick, let me ask you. Who do you think the victims of MS-13 violence are overwhelmingly? Are they Fox News?
Well, you know, who the overwhelming majority are Central American refugees who are fleeing that violence and trying to come into this country, but you're calling them people who are trying to take advantage of our legal system. The vast majority of the MS-13 and Nara Salvatrucha victims are the people in Honduras and El Salvador who are
here.
Coming here.
By the way, let me just say, last thing, I got to go. Please convince the Democrats to run in defense of MS-13. I think it's a fantastic campaign plank.
I think it would be a major mistake to defend any criminal.
But you do anyway. Thank you. Great to see you tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Tucker.
Well, even when the media admitted that President Trump was, in fact, talking about MS-13, they couldn't stop themselves from defending MS-13. CNBC's John Harwood weighed in on Twitter, as he often does. Quote, however repugnant their actions, he said, speaking of the banalities for which he is famous, MS-13 gang members are human beings, in my humble opinion. CNN's Ana Navarro went farther, of course.
He does things like call immigrants animals.
The defense is that he was following up by a statement of a sheriff saying that this is MS-13. He was just talking about MS-13. Good enough?
No, not good enough. And it is a very slippery slope when you start dehumanizing people this way. It's what the Nazis did. It's what slave owners did. It's not what Americans do.
America's moral voice, Ana Navarro, speaking from CNN. Larry O'Connor is associate editor of the Washington Times, and he joins us tonight. That's not what Americans do.
Yeah, that's what I've
Larry
heard.
Says Ana Navarro at CNN.
You know,
that's what the Nazis did.
I don't expect much from Ana Navarro. You know what I found most telling about that clip? Chris Cuomo calling what Donald Trump said. You know, he says his defense is he was talking about MS-13. It's not his defense. It's the fact. It's the truth. He wasn't defending himself. That was actually the truth that the media didn't report. But for Chris Cuomo to act like, oh, gosh, how can this be? How can you talk about MS-13? You know, it's like saying that I can't discern from the Gambino crime family and Chris Cuomo or any other Italian American. Or
exactly right.
It's outrageous. And this is my biggest problem. As you said, you're seeing Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all these other people who are condemning the remarks based on a lie. And now, 24 hours later, you'd think you'd see some retractions. Think you'd see some corrections. And the best they've got is, well, even MS-13 deserves to not be dehumanized. You know, if you can't call MS-13 gang members animals, if you can't call them out on their repugnant, repulsive behavior, you've surrendered your ability to make any moral judgments in our society.
So the first draft, and I don't do too many media segments because obviously they're just dumb and they're an arm of the Democratic Party, but the first draft of their story said that Trump had attacked undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, migrants. They said migrants. Or many who cross the border.
So that was a Democratic Party talking point.
It was a
flat out.
Absolute, total lie. And it was CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, ABC News, NBC News, C-SPAN. Even C-SPAN, who pretends to be completely down the middle, I think usually they are, they did the same thing.
So why shouldn't these be reporters' in-kind contributions to the Democratic National Committee?
That's a great question. Or maybe they should have... Associated Press, by the way, the only ones that I've seen who fully retracted it and deleted their tweets. But why aren't they called up on any kind of ethics questions?
But Jeff Bezos' paper didn't retract it?
No, I haven't seen any retraction from them. They've said further context, suggesting that it was out of context, but it wasn't out of context that they took the president. They lied about what the president said, a complete misrepresentation.
Larry O'Connor, always great to see you.
Great to see you, Tucker. Thank you.
Our northern neighbor Canada is having its own immigration debate. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's open immigration policies are causing problems across that nation. Trudeau spoke today about Canada's struggles with policing its southern border. Watch this.
Canadians remain incredibly positive about immigration. There is a large number of irregular arrivals who are crossing the border into Canada right now.
From the U.S.
From the U.S.
Yep.
But we are processing them in a responsible, rigorous way that is reassuring to Canadians. One of the precious things about Canada is that Canadians are positively inclined towards immigration and refugees. Not letting it fall into the politics of fear or division or identity is really important.
Don't worry, the irregular arrivals are being processed. How long before irregular arrivals would be a term that's official here? Probably not long. Stephen Ledrew is a former president of Trudeau's Liberal Party, and he joins us tonight. Stephen, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Tucker.
So it turns out that Canadian tolerance for immigration is not infinite, it looks like.
Well, it's not infinite, but I mean, there's a problem with this process. And the Prime Minister is talking the woo-woo stuff about the politics of division and the politics of identity. I mean, that stuff's passé. Canadians generally do support immigration. We've got an empty country up here. But we shouldn't have immigrants coming to this country just going through some back alley from the United States into Quebec and then getting picked off by the RCMP and taken to somewhere else for processing. I mean, that's not a way to arrive in any country. Ellis Island was not like that for the United States. So, I mean, Trudeau is wrong when he's saying, well, it's business as usual. We're just processing them. I mean, we've got to do something about this. No one's talking about building a wall. But what is happening is wrong, even though Canadians, yes, we should take a lot more immigrants.
Yeah, and then process them. But isn't it racist? Isn't it racist, however, to tell people they can't come to your country whenever they want and go on welfare?
Well, no, I don't think it's racist at all. I think most of those people that are coming to Canada, many of them are already in the United States. They're coming to Canada because they like Canada more than the United States. The United States is no longer such a welcome, beaconing place in the world for the smartest and the brightest, and they're coming to Canada. So that's great for Canada. But as far as coming across some back alley and there's some lady in Vermont who knits some mitts and sends them across a path, I mean, that's degrading, and it should be stopped. No wall, but it should be stopped.
Degrading to whom? Degrading to Canadians or degrading to immigrants?
Well, to both. To an immigrant to be walking in a snowdrift across to Canada and then getting arrested and picked off, that's degrading. We should have borders. We are a country. But Tucker, I think that, as I said, the people from the United States want to come and live in Canada for whatever reason. We aren't talking about gang members. We're not talking about what you were just talking about with your first two guests. We're talking about people who just want a better place to live.
But
they
why
want
not
Canada or they want Go ahead.
I mean, so you're saying that Canada ought to be able to determine who comes in and who doesn't? Should you be able to just let impressive people in and then non-impressive people, gang members, rapists? Do you think you're allowed to keep them out?
There's a whole lot of room, Tucker, between impressive people who are brain surgeons and gang members. There are people who just want to come and have a better life for themselves and for their children. And so you have to look at, there's a certain number of, if you will, skilled immigrants that you want to attract. And then there are also a certain number of refugees that for, if you will, the good of the world you attract, just like the United States does.
Of course, but Canada gets to, I guess the only point is you can determine the mix as you like, but Canada gets to make that decision. You decide who comes in and who doesn't come in.
Oh, absolutely. Whether they are skilled laborers, skilled technicians, or whether they are, as I said, refugees looking for a safe place without bullets flying around their head. But you know what? Don't make no mistake. I mean, we aren't, even though Trudeau is talking about we're welcoming for immigrants, and he was right on that point, I mean, no one is here saying that, we're going to bring in all the gang members that the United States doesn't kick out. I mean, that is simply not going to happen in Canada.
We're not kicking out many gang members, but it may surprise you to learn the Canadian immigration policy, the consensus on immigration is much more restrictive, conservative, we would say, than it is in the United States. Is that a surprising development?
Well, no. I think that we are being we are being more particular about it than we were in the past. We are still allowing a huge number of refugees here, but the city mayors, John Tory, the mayor of the city of Toronto, gave a speech 2 weeks ago saying, you know what, if you're busing all these people from Quebec down to Toronto, you better give us some money to help settle them, help put their kids in school, and help them come along. But Canada is becoming a beacon. In the last century, Tucker, you well know, as a student of history, they came from around the world. Now they're coming to Canada. I think, in fact, Tucker, that you should have a movement to give us a Statue of Liberty. We'll move it to Toronto.
Maybe we will. Though, of course, the Statue of Liberty is in our Constitution, as you may have heard. Stephen, thank you. Great to see you.
Good chatting as always.
Democrats are embracing full-blown extremism on the question of immigration. They're defending MS-13. You'd think Republicans would run on that, but no. A lot of them are embracing amnesty. Weird. One of those joins us next. Democratic Party's position on borders and immigration grows more extreme by the day. Today, Democrats have been embracing MS-13. Most Americans disagree with that. They think we should still have borders. Immigration could be a winning issue, you'd think, for the Republican Party, but it doesn't seem to be. Some House Republicans are pushing to pass immigration bills that would give amnesty to millions of people here illegally without securing the borders first. Congressman Mark Amodei is a Republican representing the state of Nevada, or Nevada as it's now known, and he joins us in studio. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for the invite, Tucker.
So, Democrats basically came out today in defense anyway, of MS-13. Their position on immigration has become so radical that you'd think Republicans would run for borders in this midterm, but they're not. Now you guys are trying to push through amnesty bills. Why?
Well, I think it's a mischaracterization of amnesty bills if you're talking to the discharge petition, because that's a procedural move to get a vote on the floor. Doesn't say you're going to vote for no borders. Doesn't say you're going to support amnesty. Says we really want to vote. And I expect the normal Republican process to play out in that vote. If it goes to the floor, it goes to the Rules Committee. Speaker can have a bill. You know, the nickname for the Rules Committee is the Speaker's Committee.
Yeah, no, I know.
When was the last time that Pete Sessions went rogue on Paul Ryan? So it's still firmly in control by the procedure.
But I'm a little bit confused as a matter of priorities. I mean, I don't think the people who would get amnesty under some of these bills are the worst people in the world. I understand their plight. I feel for them. But you wouldn't think that Republicans would be in favor of giving anyone amnesty or a path to citizenship before a permanent fix to the border problem, but they are.
Well, in fairness, Tucker, somebody probably should define amnesty on both sides of the issue, because quite frankly, when you look at the four bills, one of them is Bob Goodlatte's, one of them is whatever Paul Ryan wants, one of them is Hurd's, and one of them is the Democrats' Dreamers Act. But just like the Senate did a couple of months ago, if none of them get 218, nothing goes through.
But why aren't Republicans, look, the last election was about the border wall. You can argue about whether it works or not, but voters voted for that. They want it.
Yep.
It's a democracy. They should get it. They're not close to getting it, and Republicans aren't pushing it. And instead they're pushing to legalize people here illegally. It seems like an inversion of the priorities of voters.
Well, I think there's a few more facts out there. First of all, the administration asked for 74 miles of wall in the last Omni. That ends on September 30th. They got 90. The administration got a 10% increase in DHS funding. So that's not we don't care about borders. I think you'll be surprised to find out if we ever get the chance to vote on something, because the House, Tucker, never has. Even the Senate's voted on this, and I've been critical of the Senate about what they don't do. If we ever get a chance to vote on immigration and border security together, which I would expect would happen, I think you'll be surprised to know how many people support border security.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second, because the Republicans control everything. If they really wanted to build a wall, there would be a wall in place, but they clearly don't, or they would, right?
Well, I don't know if I'd say I wouldn't believe it for a second, because quite frankly, the folks who had the whole House to run was when Harry and the folks had 60 in the Senate.
Right.
But notwithstanding that, it's like, how much money can you spend before September 30th? You guys rightfully do shows that talk about what are you doing with the money and how come you're doing nothing. This procedural process is this. We'd like a chance to vote to let people like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, everybody else on the face of the earth judge me by how I vote. Heck, there was a deadline for March 6th, Tucker, that the president said, I want immigration taken care of. We blew by that. Nobody even kind of it's like, can we please? You know, I'm not a constitutional guy, but there is a line in the Constitution that says the Congress shall regulate a system of naturalization. It's really our job. Final point is this. Does anybody think the status quo is good? Sanctuary cities, sanctuary states,
no, it's all
border
bad.
problems. It's like we need to do our job and vote on it. That's our work product.
Last very quick question. If it turns out that people here illegally get set on a path to citizenship before we build a wall, will you see that as a victory or a loss?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
But if it did?
Well, if it did, then that's a problem. Then I judge people by how they vote.
All right.
That's fair.
Congressman, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Today marks the one-year anniversary of the Mueller investigation. What have we learned 365 days in? Joe DeGenev has been taking notes every one of those days, and he joins us next. Like prisoners putting checks on a concrete wall, we like to mark the passage of time on this show. And as of today, Robert Mueller's investigation into Russia has been running for an entire year. What have we learned? Joe DeGenev has been taking close notes from day one. He's a former U.S. attorney, of course, one of our favorite guests. He joins us tonight with a recap. Joe, what do we know?
We know that Hillary Clinton was illegally exonerated. We knew that a year ago. We know that there was a substantial effort to frame the current president of the United States with crimes by infiltrating his campaign and then his administration with spies that the FBI had set upon them. We have learned that the crimes were committed by the FBI, senior members of the Department of Justice, John Brennan, Mr. Clapper, Mr. Comey, and others associated with the Democratic Party, and that Donald Trump and his associates committed no crimes.
That's quite a litany. So, to the spying question, when the president tweeted that one morning, and I'll never forget it,
yes,
they spied on us from Trump Tower. And I don't think there's a single person who read that who thought, well, that's kind of a heavy-duty charge. Can you prove it? And, of course, he was derided immediately as insane and as a tinfoil hat guy. That's, in effect, been proved.
Oh, absolutely. Categorically and unequivocally, it has been proved that the FBI, in violation of all guidelines, all legislation, and I believe they committed crimes in doing so, purposely sent people into the Trump campaign to plant false information, then force that information to be forwarded back to CIA and then funneled to the FBI to be used as false information in FISA applications. Everybody involved in that process who knowingly participated committed a crime.
So why aren't they being held to account?
As of today, I understand that a referral for criminal prosecution has been made by Mr. Horowitz to Mr. Huber, who is investigating the FISA leaks, the unmasking, the leaks of the unmasking, and everything we described tonight. Criminal referrals have already been made, and I suggest that Mr. Brennan, who loves to make comment about the process, get himself a good lawyer, not a good writer.
Wait. John Brennan, the NBC News paid consultant?
Yes, NBC News' consultant, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the most partisan hack leader of the CIA in history, needs a very, very good lawyer.
Criminal lawyer.
Yes, criminal lawyer. Oh, yes. He doesn't need a slip and fall lawyer, although he's going to slip and fall. He's going to be in front of a grand jury shortly.
Well, that's news.
Yes, and it's good news.
There's not a single time you've come on where I don't feel better by the end.
Thank you.
And this is no exception.
The country feels better today.
The country feels better. That's the story, and I hope that happens. He richly deserves it.
Yes.
Thank you, Joe.
You bet.
Maxine Waters is at it again. Hero to the left. Mark Stein joins us to break down her latest remarks. Stay tuned. Well, so far, America has proved powerless at stopping the spread of the creepy porn lawyer. He's still everywhere. If he appears in your backyard, don't bother calling authorities. Flight is your only option. But for the nation, the only solution may be a quarantine. And thankfully, CNN and MSNBC may soon step up to the plate. Talent agency UTA reportedly is pitching both channels on a TV show that is starring both the creepy porn lawyer and Anthony Scaramucci. For the record, both men are denying it, but if it's true, we have no idea whether the show will be any good. But for the sake of public safety and just to keep it contained in one place, it may be a good thing that it's coming anyway. Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California is back. Not that she ever went anywhere. She recently got into a fight on the floor of the House with Republican Mike Kelly. She said that car dealers are racist. Here's part of it.
I can't believe that in 2018 we're on the floor of Congress seeing the denial of some of my colleagues about discrimination in the auto lending business.
To impugn the integrity of the automobile people is absolutely beyond reproach. And so if you run out of facts, I guess the next thing you have to go to is discrimination.
I am more offended as an African-American woman than you will ever be. And this business about making America great again, it is your president that's dividing this country.
I'm more offended than you'll ever be. Therefore, I win. In the Who's Offended Olympics, Maxine Waters is always a gold medalist. Mark Stein, an author and columnist and all-purpose genius, joins us tonight, and longtime connoisseur of Maxine Waters. So, to me, what's fascinating is not that Maxine Waters exists, and maybe you kind of want people like Maxine Waters around because it's kind of hilarious, but that she's suddenly become elevated to the status of hero in the Democratic Party. What does that tell us?
Yeah, it's interesting to me that she is not within the Democratic Party as self-evidently ridiculous as the creepy porn lawyer you were talking about, who I think actually he's going to be walking Meghan down the aisle at Windsor Castle on Saturday. Meghan doesn't know it. Meghan doesn't know it, but he's just decided to swing by and do it. He figures it'll work for him. But the interesting thing about Maxine Waters is that this is someone who, for example, she's close friends with Louis Farrakhan, whom we've talked about before, who believes he's taken up in a spacecraft to commune with the ghost of Elijah Muhammad and various other Fruit of Islam space aliens once a month. I don't know whether he takes Maxine up there with him once a month, although it would certainly explain a lot. By the way, I would be in favor of that, because if the space aliens encounter Maxine Waters and think she's a typical Earthling, they will have no plans to come anywhere near this planet. So they would be performing a useful service if they did that. But it is actually extraordinary to me, this. For example, she recently called Trump's hotel in Washington a criminal-looking hotel. This is a woman who lives in a $4 million house, and in that sense sums up what Kanye West was talking about, the whole what have you guys done for me lately? What has mortgaging the entire future of one demographic group to the likes of Maxine Waters actually done for them? And that's a question I think more and more are asking.
So, but for garden variety liberals who in normal times would have a problem with Maxine Waters' ethics and her rhetoric, and she's a Democrat, so they're not going to criticize her in public, but Maxine Waters, please, she's too far. They've woken up in the last year and decided that they really like Maxine Waters, and she speaks for them. Is there nobody on the left who's saying, well, wait a second, that's too far, she's too crazy, because she discredits us? Where are the reasonable voices?
No, I think what's interesting is that she made Time magazine, for anyone who wasn't aware, Time magazine is still out there and still publishing every week. She made Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world, which is patently absurd. Time magazine, at a certain point, used to pretend to be internationalist, so they'd have put, the deputy fisheries minister of the South Sandwich Islands on the list because he's really making a name for himself as a player in Law of the Sea negotiations. That's how Time used to be. Instead, they put Maxine Waters on there, who is totally uninfluential, except outside a very tiny coterie of hardcore activists who chant along with her when she says impeach 45, as she did recently at a memorial service. I mean, when they have these organ donor cards saying if I get killed in a fatal road accident, give all my body parts to somebody who needs them. I'm going to carry a Maxine Waters card in my wallet saying that if I get killed, I don't want her chanting impeach 45 at my memorial service. This has no appeal other than beyond a very hardcore coterie. But that coterie is well established in the media, which is why Time magazine made themselves look fools by putting her on this most influential 100 people in the world list.
Trump has driven them insane. It's unbelievable. Let historians mark this moment. Mark Stein, great to see you, as always.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Time for Final Exam next. Can you beat our news experts at remembering what happened this week? So much did. That's next. Time now for Final Exam, our cutthroat weekly competition in which we decide which news personality has been paying closer attention to the events they cover. This week's defending champion is Fox correspondent Griff Jenkins, temporarily crippled in a mishap in the Fox and Friends weekend set. He's being challenged by fellow correspondent Kristen Fisher. Kristen Fisher, it's great to see you.
Great to see you.
You're taking on a buzzer show a one-armed man.
Well, and I want you to know that I didn't want my victory to be marked with an asterisk, so I brought my own little sling here. So
it's really...
She knows my secret. All of a sudden, I'm very intimidated.
You got to say, je suis Griff Jenkins.
Je suis Griff Jenkins.
I love it.
Here we go.
Yes.
See?
That's incredible.
I'm not going to let your intimidation
normally, I'm going to say hand on buzzers.
May the best sling win.
May the best sling win. This is unbelievable. All right, so you know the rules, but I'm going to say it anyway. I ask the questions. First one to buzz in gets to answer the question. You must wait until I finish completing the question in order to answer. Each correct answer is worth a point. If you get one wrong, you lose a point. Best of 5 wins. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. First is a multiple choice question. American Airlines expanding its crackdown on emotional support animals. Ferrets and hedgehogs, unfortunately, no longer welcome on board American flights. Which kind of animal has also been banned? Is it A, parrots, B, goats, or C, miniature ponies? Griff Jenkins.
Goats.
Not miniature ponies? Goats?
I just like goats.
Okay, goats. Is it goats? Roll tape, please.
Starting in July, American Airlines will ban ferrets, hedgehogs, and goats from their planes.
And goats.
We went to a goat for comment.
Oh, goats won. You kind of always have to go with the goat.
They're amazing animals. I can't believe you're wearing a sling, Kristen.
And I want you to know I did buzz and I knew the answer on that one, but...
That is compassion. That is empathy.
I was distracted a little bit.
Yeah, no, I know. It made me an elaborate
It's actually a better
see
sling
it
than
as
mine.
much.
Question
It's brand
2. Are you ready? There's a royal wedding this weekend. It's multiple choice as well. The American bride has learned all about tea etiquette. To avoid embarrassment, tea in Great Britain must be stirred with a spoon in a specific direction. Is it A, clockwise, B, counterclockwise, C, 12-6, 12-6? Kristen Fisher.
Counterclockwise.
Counterclockwise. Let's roll the tape.
When we stir, we want to never stir clockwise or counterclockwise. It's actually just 12-6, 12-6.
This I did not
just like
know.
That. Can you imagine? Meghan had to learn this, and she even had afternoon tea with the Queen and had all the corgis sitting on her feet. Can you imagine the pressure?
Yeah.
Does your pinky play a part?
I don't know. In the decline of empire, yes, it does. Kristen Fisher. Question 3. A T-shirt being sold by The Gap is being recalled and destroyed because it apparently shows an erroneous map of which Asian country? Kristen Fisher.
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
China, it leaves off Taiwan.
Roll tape, please.
She knows.
The Gap has created a bit of an international uproar. The company issued an apology and pulled a T-shirt featuring an incorrect map of China. Now I would like the Gap to apologize to me for what they consider a men's medium.
What's the Gap? So, China, Taiwan.
Yes.
Our judges say absolutely that is correct. You are back to par. Whew. Question 4. There's still time.
Okay. All right.
Paranormal activity underway in Michigan. A man there says his motion sensor security camera captured an image of a celestial being hovering above his truck. What was floating above the man's vehicle? Griff Jenkins.
An angel.
An angel. An angel over the pickup truck. Is that true in Michigan? Roll tape, please.
Take a good look. Many, including their pastors, said that they believe this image, captured by a security camera, shows an angel hovering over the family's truck last week. So could it be?
I was like, wow. I mean, that is an angel.
The photos are exactly how they were taken. I choose to believe it.
An angel.
But what was it really?
What was it really? Yeah, that's the deeper question. But by the way, we don't address that. We're sticking with metaphysics here. Final question.
Oh, man.
Arguably the story of the week. A short audio clip has divided this nation, as you know. The audio has people scratching their heads. They cannot tell whether the voice in the clip is saying the word Yanny or the word Laurel. Today it has been settled. What is the actual word uttered on that clip? Griff Jenkins.
Laurel.
Laurel. Roll tape, please.
Hey, that's what I heard.
Yanny. It is Laurel.
Yanny.
That's a recording of the word Laurel from a website, from vocabulary.com. The brain interprets what it's hearing, and there's some background noise that got in there that distorted it, that caused some people to interpret a frequency and hear Yanny.
Correct.
Laurel.
Griff Jenkins. You know, Kristen, I don't, it's no insult to Griff when I say that I believe our audience is rooting for you. Griff Jenkins, congratulations. You are rolling through here, and again, the Eric Wemple mug is your prize.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you both. Great to see you, Kristen. Come back.
Don't I get a loser mug?
No, you don't, but you get the gratitude of our audience.